You don't stop, it's 3.5 hours on clear roads. It took us.
Not in the winter? You know, the very last resort that I take, how to contact my kids when they don't answer your phone calls. I use, you know, the lost mode,
Telepathy,
the lost mode in the phone. I
It's,
press that and it
here,
rings.
for the
yeah, then they haven't deleted the program.
It's actually just.
I can't believe it's, they still
10 miles
allow
worth
them
of
to be on
Bangor.
their phone.
Oh, so it's on your
I
post?
would
No, that's
delete-
Bar Harbor you're thinking.
Sorry.
Oh, no, yeah, right.
You can
Thank
see
you,
it
thank you.
now.
Yeah,
They
yeah.
see it.
It's,
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
I used to not
Yeah, you
answer
go
my
down
mom's
95,
phone calls
It's
because I knew if I answered them, she'd be like, "What are you doing?" and want to check wherever I was. So if I wasn't where I was supposed to be, I just wouldn't answer. Sorry, mom, we're in the basement watching a movie. I was like, now you can't get away with that stuff. Find my phone.
Yeah, they're paying
And then
for
my wife
phone.
doesn't.
That's the deal, right?
It's probably nominally more expensive to get a boat.
No, I don't have those phones anymore.
You will again.
No,
For sure, north of Portland, but even north
Give
of
it.
Freeport.
my daughter will
Use
have
your
those
car
problems.
up 75 miles an hour.
She'll call you.
Call me.
I don't know where he is.
Did I tell you she's, Freddie's gonna be a big brother?
Yeah, I was in Bangor, but
Congratulations.
it's bigger than.
And he just turned a
Yeah,
year.
it is. It is.
That's exciting though.
It is.
It's fun for them.
Yeah. Although she doesn't feel great right now. Yeah, they'll be 18 months apart.
Does she get
in
really sick?
April. Not ridiculous, no, I have to say no. I know people who really, really got sick, and even though she might not feel well, it's not.
It's not like
Sarah, I mean, she spent time in the hospital, she was.
she gets it really bad. I got really sick, but never in the hospital.
You know, I mean,
Snow.
Yeah.
like,
I think they make
one of
best out of it. They buy
British
snowmobiles
princesses,
and ski and-
Markle, she, I mean,
Right.
and
Embrace
spent
it versus
serious
spreading it.
amount of time
So
in
is
the
it.
hospital because she can't
Scary.
hold it down, and that's just because they need fluids because you get so sick. I mean, there's a name for that.
Hypermesis.
Yeah,
Something like that.
But no,
Yeah.
Melissa just is exhausted and, you know, and she's got a,
When you're in one country.
A baby.
now she's got a, you know, she's got a toddler, she's got a baby.
That makes a lot
Can't just take a nap.
I remember like, all these Canadians would be.
Hi, Thomas.
And they thought that country was so nice. And I was
Yep.
living in Virginia at the time.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Nice to meet you.
Thomas, how are you? Kevin Foley, good seeing you again. It's, good, thanks. It is,
Hi, Thomas.
Hey, Chris.
How are you, Tom? Nice to meet you.
All right, we're
Hi.
6 minutes late.
Over the top? Yeah, oh, I got it.
you have to wait for the secretary.
We sure do. I didn't mean to segregate myself, but this is open, so I can't push this forward.
You're all by yourself.
You know, Italy
That's
is,
okay.
is full of
Thanks.
gypsies who
All right,
pickpocket.
bye-bye.
Well, what
Thank you,
happened,
Len,
she
for
left it
trying.
on
It
the
won't work.
plane.
And I was
But you'll
even
get
trying
it.
to use
I would
someone's
hope, but
code
I
to
don't
get
know.
into that. That doesn't seem to allow you into to copy from that machine, and I don't know why.
It's just
So,
a printer, right?
Yeah, I'll talk to Chris McClure, because there should be a copier available here.
You know what, more importantly, we need access.
To those, right.
And
Whether they
we-
leave a instructions here in some sort of a cell,
Someone to contact, because I think that, so that's not on, so I think there's something else going on usually, but this happens every couple times, we can't. Thank you. Awesome, thank you very much. Okay. Yep. Why are you asking that? All right, everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. It is 7:10. I call the meeting to order. We're a little behind because of technology issues, but let's open it up to public comment. Reserving comment for later? All right, so no public comment. I just wanted to,
Can we start with just one thing? Can
Yeah.
we introduce the new members? Yeah.
yes, we absolutely can. So we have two excellent new members, Jen Luz and Kevin Foley. Welcome. Thank you for agreeing to join us and spend your time on the finance committee. We appreciate it immensely, and we're excited to have you both. And does anyone have any comments or questions before we dive in, or?
Don't you have prepared statements?
They're biographical sketch.
You really wanna go over time, don't you?
Yeah.
All right, I'll be fine.
Miss Chairman.
So let's start with the kind of reviewing the FY19 end of year financials. So Lynn was kind enough to send them over to us. And I think I will kind of, unfortunately, we don't have it on the screen to review Tim's work, but it was emailed out today. If anyone has it printed, and I can also share.
I have some relevant questions that, even though people can't see it, maybe Lynn could come to the speaker and Mike can help me understand some of these nuances which are important for people. You can actually see it in the document that was printed out for you. Some of these same areas. What I've done is I've eliminated in my schedules some of the less relevant columns to make it shrink and short. We started out with the original appropriation. In all cases. Does the original appropriation, is that the same thing as the final approved budget for the year? So that's where we start.
No, is that, what book
This
is
is,
that?
this
That's
is
in-
2020.
Okay.
The official 2020.
Yep. So the.
I'm just trying to get my
original-
columns right.
The original ATM adopted budget has to stay original. And then
Okay.
it gets revised through several different methods. One is, on the
Meth-
revenue side, is through the recap sheet. So the revenues aren't adopted at town meeting. So the revenues are put forth based on the Revenue Fixed Cost Committee and the recommendations of the town manager. So those can change at any time. They
they
do
change after
mostly
town?
change based on the tax recap sheet. So once the tax recap sheet and the rate is set, it changes the revenues.
When does that happen?
That happens in December,
Okay.
when we set the tax
So
rate.
therefore, you'd see in the next column after original appropriation, the transfer adjustments.
Correct.
On the revenue side,
Yes,
numbers changing, because there's pretty sizable things going on, that move.
Yep. Well, the-
Net-wise, no.
right. The biggest move that you see is because when we build the budget, we only build it on the real estate because we don't know what the personal property portion is, so that gets adjusted when the tax rate is set.
Okay.
Because it's based on the values and how many properties we have. So that's how the big move on the largest portion of the revenues.
So let's stick with revenue, this revenue budget,
Yep.
revenue plan. Then we have the original, which is not blessed at town meeting, but
Yep.
we're also chiming in it.
Correct.
Transfer amounts, and we have a revised budget. And then I know because of the system, it's called year-to-date expended, but it's really year-to-date revenue, right?
Yeah,
Obviously.
Yep.
So in the case of property taxes, in total, we ended up with 122,000 less than what we had
Right.
planned, which was not a lot on 74,
but we'll
73.
collect that. It's just not collected within this fiscal year.
Good point.
Yep,
And in the case of motor vehicle excise tax, that's an interesting one for me. We
Mm-hmm.
actually came in $550,000, $549,000
Over.
more than your revised
Mm-hmm.
plan. So how was that?
because as you know, you've been on the Revenue Fixed Cost Committee.
These are sort of like softball questions for you.
Right, so
Teaching.
we've gradually been increasing the motor vehicle excise. We originally had 4 million, then we brought it up to 4.2, 4.3. This year, in 19, we brought it up to 4.6. So it's a sign that economy is very good, okay? Is that gonna be sustainable for a long period of time? I think the bubble is coming, and
Yep.
it's gonna start dropping. So it's not unusual in good economy that you get excess motor vehicle excise. A lot of people have bought new cars. And that's what happens when you're in a good economy. And you can't predict that because it's a cyclical.
Okay. So then the other one, which to me is a bit of a softball, well, I mean, almost like a way to cushion things, is the interest income. I mean,
Okay,
it wasn't even close.
right, so that,
So it's just for, because you could be looking in there forever, but the interest income, original 130,000, it came in at 620,000.
right, and I can explain that. As you know, we had a big turnover in the treasurer collector's office. We pulled in a treasurer collector who was very strong on investment. She worked for quite a few investment firms, so she knew how to invest funds properly. She invested a lot of the town's money in CDs, got great interest rates, upwards of over 3%. So at the time of our budgeting, we couldn't predict that. So, as you all know, the treasurer collector resigned, because she just didn't, I don't think she know that she really enjoyed working on municipality side, because she worked from the private sector, and, she
Should have
moved
found a way to
on.
keep her, but she brought in her salary times 4 or 5.
I agree, but we will research and get a replacement who will follow through with the investments that she put in place.
Okay.
So, and again, is the interest income, it's coming down.
Yeah.
So are we gonna get another good year like that? I can't guarantee that. So that's another wild card where, again, I'm not gonna budget $130,000 this year, but I'm not gonna budget 650 either. Because the chances of that coming in at that level, again, is gonna be a
So she's.
wild card.
What Lynn's doing right now is helping you also explain the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee. She's actually setting some groundwork.
Ground rules,
Ground rules already.
whoever's gonna be on it.
Yeah. And then, this is the other interesting thing. On the revenue side, we
Mm-hmm. Yep.
came in $1.7 million more
Mm-hmm.
than planned.
Yep.
How does that, what is that, how's that look, how does that work with free cash?
So that will go into part of the calculation of the free cash.
Part of the calculation.
Yes, yep, so whatever free cash we didn't use, so last year we had 11 million, okay? We used some to do some capital items and things through capital planning and move to stabilization, things like that. So whatever balance was left, that rolls back into the calculation of the fund balance, and then any surplus expenditures and revenue get put into that, things
So you
get taken out.
you segued into
So-
my next question really
Yep.
was, is when you look at the expenses, which didn't get printed out, but when you look at the expenses,
Mm-hmm. Yep. We also had turn back of 1.3.
you had, our revised budget was $98.1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Came in at 97.3, so there's nearly $900,000 less spent than
Yep.
planned. So that'll go back into free cash. am I
Into the
right?
free cash calculation, and then, which coincidentally, the balance sheet got submitted today for that certification. Hopefully I'll have that number in about a week.
So when Sasha and I were talking, she says, what sort of things do you look for? And obviously, on the revenue side, I was looking at big bumps.
Yep.
You know, on the expense side, I look at big bumps. And when you see the big bumps, really there's one that stands out, and that's the group insurance, because that's the
Correct.
tradition of, we're still budgeting as if we're self-insured.
Right, but not as aggressive as we were when we were self-insured. The increases aren't up at 12 to 15%, they're at a modest 7% based on what our insurance is going up. So it's helping us to spread that savings out. We had projected, when we went to the GIC, that we would probably be able to use those savings to get us through probably good 9 to 10 years, if we continue.
It's the year that Van started.
Right, so 8 years ago?
2009,
Yeah.
2010.
No.
That's
No,
2013, because
13.
that's, I remember, it was
Right.
2013.
13,
Yeah.
I think.
Yep.
So the goal is to, economy's good right now, but still, it's helping us to carry the budget and continue, and keeping the savings where it is, not having to dip into, the stabilization funds, things like that. So when the time comes when everything is going back down and the economy is really bad, we will have the ability to still function at the level we're functioning at.
So one of the things I did for when you do get a chance to look at the schedules on the expense tab is I made I'll call it pivot table. It basically consolidates all of the like accounts together and doesn't distinguish departments. So I'm able to see, you're able to see like things like group insurance. I mean, we purposely budgeted at the time before any transfers, $1.8 million more than we really expended.
Right.
But with transfers, it ended up closer to $984,000. The other thing that I thought was interesting was your overtime. Again, that's across the board.
Yep.
So net overtime actually came in $300,000 better than planned. That's huge. And then
And I think
go ahead.
a lot of that is probably attributed to the fact that some of the overtime got pushed to the Columbia Gas issue.
Ooh,
And it was about probably $300,000 to $400,000 over what we
And
would.
none of these
and it's
numbers
not
ref-
in, it does not include the Columbia Gas.
none of this reflects the reimbursements from the Columbia Gas. Okay.
No, that, per the DOR instructions, we had to create a separate account for that. It originally was being generated through two accounts in each department on the operating budget, but after we worked everything out with the DOR, the requirement was to set up a separate account,
Okay.
which is a special revenue account.
There's a lot of, the town has done a very good job in budgeting. They're conservative, allows us to build up our free cash. This is my giving a little
Yep.
speech. Builds up our free cash, also allows us to do some healthy reserves. All in all, it helps protect and mitigate any particular potential downsides in the economy. When I also looked at the school department, and I have a separate tab for that as well, that I broke out just the school department, since that's $49 million of the budget. Again, I'm sorry you don't have this in front of you, but one of the things that pops for me when I looked at this was the out-of-district. It's always a wild card. $5 million was budgeted. We spent $4.3 million. There was some transfers going on there as well. But it was a substantial, well, you don't transfer until we're done with the year, right?
Correct.
So
Well,
that
they can transfer amongst their own accounts, not to change the original
Total.
appropriation. The only change that gets made that would increase the budget is at the end of the year when I get approval from the Finance Committee and the Board of Selectmen to do the
Without going back
year-end.
to that schedule, I don't know how
Yeah.
much we transferred at that time, but the fact of the matter is typically, this number usually goes north as opposed to south, and it went way south. It went from $5 million to 4.3. That's a good news story, but
Right.
that's again one of those wild card numbers you never know what's gonna
Yep.
end up happening.
Programs are working. Right.
Yeah,
Could be.
yeah.
I mean,
Wouldn't that be amazing?
Well, that's the,
That's right.
That's the goal.
That's what we're trying to do.
on programs specifically, so students can stay in district, so.
Yep.
let's,
And
know.
just to give a synopsis for you guys, so historically, the school committee and the school department have been trying to focus on programs to keep kids in district, to reduce those out-of-district costs, and because, I think Greg Gilligan said last time, it's the right thing to do, to have kids go to school in their own communities if we can do that appropriately. So, to see that number go down is a big deal.
Yeah, just some of the categories within there. By the way, I think it should tug you when you see one of the categories is called homeless students.
Yep.
It tugged my heart when I saw it. But the transportation costs went down $250,000 from plan, which is huge. Specialists went down $39,000. Collaborative tuition prepay went down $416,000. I don't know what happened there, but
Yeah,
that's
so
like 2/3.
Jim Mealy would be able to explain more. I don't know whether they've shifted costs to, because they might have gotten grants. He would be able to explain that in more detail as to if the costs truly went down or if they were able to distribute the cost to a grant that
Just-
they might
Would
have
that be
gotten.
the same with, so, I don't mean to, but, salary professionals are kind of across the board, there seem to be.
I don't know what's in that category. They usually
That's what I'm asking, so what is, do you know, or is that a Jim question?
It would be a Jim.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would, yeah.
We'll just, and we,
Actually, when I looked at the salaries for the schools, he did a pretty good job budgeting the salaries as a line item across the board. It's just some of these other, because this collaborative prepay tuition was budgeted at 694,000, and it came in at 278. So it's a 60% change, and it's like, what happened?
Right.
Last but not,
That's just enrollment too. They changed
Right.
the enrollment levels.
yes, yep. And then, last but not least, are the enterprise funds.
Yep.
We successfully, again, without the schedules, you can't see this very well, but 2 out of the 3 enterprise funds successfully added to their retained earnings, where, I can say it this way, their revenues exceeded their expenses in the case of sewer by $810,000, water by roughly $540,000. The Stevens Estate had a loss of $133,000, which I think was expected, so that came in pretty
Well,
close.
you have to, it's not really a loss of 133, because out of that 133, it included 120, which was a transfer from retained earnings.
Oh,
Yep.
so it's 250. Wait, what?
No,
Say that
it's
again?
only 30, it's only 10. Well,
Oh, 'cause
actually,
it was
it's 20,000, I show that they had a $20,000 loss, operating loss,
Right,
Okay.
right, right.
as of June 30th. Yep.
well, all in all, you know.
But the water and sewer enterprises are still very strong. Again, there will be of course, no increase to the rates. It's running steady, and we'll use any of the retained earnings for any of the infrastructure work that we'll do moving forward again.
So I do encourage on this committee, though, when people look at the numbers, things such as, you know, I think I saw Lynn there make maintenance. You know, we spent much less in maintenance or outside services, or one of these numbers, and you go, why? And it just sort of says, are we maintaining enough, or are we doing the right things? Because the short-term gains could be long-term losses. Just to,
Would that be attributed to Columbia Gas again? I'm
For
just-
this year, yeah, I mean, this was an unusual year. There's a lot of things that we planned on doing that we couldn't do.
Yeah.
Because our focus was on
Good
the
point.
Columbia gas.
good point,
So it's a tough year for you to analyze in that way.
good point.
We're still dealing with Columbia gas.
Thus,
So, we
Thus-
will be for
Thus
the
the-
next 4 years, probably.
thus having Lynn and others here, because it's
Yep.
able to provide some insights as
Yep.
far as why.
Yeah, it's-
That's really all I got, because I don't have much more.
I think,
This is great, Tim. I mean, I looked at it before. It's awesome that you did this.
Mhm.
You can never leave.
Yeah.
This was great.
Thank you.
it was really helpful, thank you. So if everyone can, I apologize that we don't have it up on the screen to kind of point to, but everyone should have it in your email, and it's also, you know, associated with this meeting, with all of our documents, so you can review it. And if you have any additional questions, let me know, and I can aggregate those and send Lynn a quick email if we want any more information. And like I said, thank you, Lynn. All right. So why don't we approve? It's kind of down at the bottom, but why don't we approve the minutes just to get through that? Jump around a little bit. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes, or?
Sure, so moved. Approve the minutes of, meeting date July 30, 2019.
A second?
Second?
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, great. Okay, so kind of the main piece of, I think, our discussion tonight, besides going over kind of the FY19 actuals, was just to talk about how we want to move forward this year. We briefly talked about in our last meeting kind of the areas of focus that we wanted to have as a finance committee in FY20. I would love to kind of go through that again, and then also talk about how we kind of want to structure this year. So I think something that Lynn has kind of offered to do is to send us an actual to budget on a monthly basis after the first quarter. And that's going to allow us to really focus on the actuals and not just on the budget process. So I think it's helpful for us to have a really solid understanding of what's happening on a timely basis, not just to focus on what we're hoping will happen in the future. That being said, I think the best approach, and I'm open to suggestions, is for everyone to kind of have their own section of the budget that they can kind of take ownership over, and that's you kind of become the master in that subject, I guess, in terms of if there's any associated meetings for that particular part of the budget, any big issues, any variances in a month, you would point that out at the next finance committee meeting, and kind of we would just go to you as a subject matter expert, if for lack of a better word, going forward. And we would also, I think, end up having that person write the section of the warrant letter. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? Does anyone have strong opinions about what you'd like to focus on, or? So we can go back to our the warrant with me somewhere. We can also look at the warrant letter. But I mean, we pretty much have the school budget, OPEB. I think kind of we can split the enterprise funds up. I think that might be helpful. So someone who's really focusing on water, sewer, someone who's focused on the Stevens estate, general fund. What do you guys? Does anyone have a preference on what they'd like to focus on?
Sasha, maybe I have a quick question
Yeah.
to Lynn. How is actually the monthly process for you internally? So when you get the actuals, is there a monthly budget review meeting with you and your team, with the town manager?
I have a month-end checklist when I reconcile the month-end, and that I produce a year-to-date budget report for revenues and expenditures for all the funds. On a quarterly basis, and I was doing it probably last year. I didn't do it at all this year because of the situation that went on in town and the extra duties I had. A quarterly report gets posted to the website under the budgets and financials, which includes cash balances, which are reconciled with the treasurer collector, and year-to-date budget reports for every fund. So the reports that Sasha had mentioned that she asked me for will start being produced after the September month-end closes. So usually by the 10th to the 15th of the following month, everything's reconciled and the budget reports are printed. I analyze the budgets on a weekly basis as I'm working with them. People are requesting transfers, I'm reviewing revenue projections, things like that, on my own to prepare for meetings such as this, or with the Board of Selectmen or the town manager.
So it's not a formal meeting.
No.
You send out your notes to
Yep, I
department
produce a
heads.
cover letter, explaining what went on for the month and the changes for the, and my projections moving forward. So it's kinda hard for July and August to make projections of how the year's gonna go, so you get a full quarter in of 3 months, and then you can project based on the collections plus the history of how I know the.
And that's the
town
report we
collections
would
go.
get.
Yeah, well, it's already produced, so
So
Lynn
the
and I kind
same-
of talked, and I wasn't Lynn has enough work to do, so
Yeah.
wasn't interested in making more work for her, so whatever she already produces, she's gonna, forward to us as well, and so then we can utilize that as a committee to kind of just keep a pulse, on what's going on an actual basis.
So we would also get your notes,
Yes.
so your
You get my
highlights.
cover letter,
Yeah, yeah.
you get the budget reports and the list of all of the funds and their balances in them. Yep, subtotal by category between special revenue, capital, trust fund, agency funds and things like that. And I don't like to produce that report until I've confirmed and reconciled the full month and everything's been posted and recorded properly. Yep.
So that being said, I mean, do you guys wanna just first, instead of kind of saying, oh, I wanna take this piece, do you wanna establish how we wanna split it up? I kind of want, this to be a collaborative process so that I'm not dictating that. I mean, what do you think is the most important thing? How should we approach it?
I would like to see just as be an example of how that report looks like.
So do you have access to the website?
Not right now. but-
Because there's prior reports in there from.
Okay,
So if you
all
looked
right.
at fiscal year 2018,
Yeah.
there would be quarterly reports in there under the financials.
No, I mean, also your notes, are they also in there?
Yeah, my cover letter, so it's a
Everything,
PDF
okay.
file that I scan in and upload to the
Yeah.
website. Yep. It would be the identical, which would go to the Board of Selectmen.
Under
and then-
budgets.
And then it would go to the Finance Committee.
Yeah, do you know how it's linked, just so we can have it in our,
Yep,
No.
do you have the website right there?
Yes.
just so everyone has it?
So you go to my department, and,
Documents under?
documents. Oh, actually, no, that's the documents for the town, so go to the departments.
Oh, okay.
Session
You can go actually,
Right here, the departments.
yeah. go to
The budget
finance.
year is really broken down into
Yeah, okay, I'm
Which
sorry.
is too fast.
I know.
3 or 4 different components.
Nope,
This is
go
me
back.
just because I plan on being the next Stan Limper. What the heck does that mean, Tim?
Means I'll be the historian kind of
Oh,
thing,
I-
and
yeah, I
the
see,
voice
I
of
see.
wisdom and everything else,
Yeah,
and,
there you go.
I'll wear a robe though.
So.
It starts out really
Check in,
with
19. There might
the
be
budget
something
policy
on 19. I don't-
and the introduction of the revenue and fixed cost. And with the revenue and fixed cost and the budget policy statement that the town manager produces, it then morphosizes itself into 2 substructures. One is the operating budget, where all the department heads are putting together their operating budgets, and they're giving some general guidelines and saying, you have to rationalize and justify whatever you want. And there are some ground rules, anything less than $50,000 of capital type of stuff is expensed. You have to pay for it out of your budget. Anything greater than $50,000 would be considered as a capital, but that's the operating budget. But first, before that comes the capital budget, capital expenses, that they're putting together what their current year needs or next year needs are gonna be, plus another 4 more years. And this is a wish list. And they have a good schedule of prioritizing what is most important to the town, best payback, infrastructure requirements now, and so those are the components that'll come your way. First, the capital budget, and then comes the operating budget components. And then within the operating budget, I think it comes down to, you got the school budget and everything else almost. School budget's half of the budget, and then the other critical parts in there are the enterprise funds, are the debt, that what they'll call the non-departmental expenses, group insurance, retirement. These seems to be the ones that have the riskier parts associated, not so much the debt, but the insurances are starting to be careful, you have to be watching. The regular department head budgets are usually pretty good, there's not much,
So,
I just wanted to get a big picture of the year.
yeah, and I think that's helpful. So we can do this a couple different ways, right? So we can take it by topic, because, for example, the school, you're gonna have a capital budget and operating budget, and those are separate, but they relate in terms of the overall objectives of the school, and perhaps because that's a large budget, we have more than one person that's focused on that, and you can kind of delegate between two of you or however many, the specific pieces you want to focus on. Or we can kind of say, all right, someone focus on looking at insurance and digging into that piece of it. Or we can just take it kind of how we typically do when we create the warrant letter, which is a little bit different. And so I'm open to all of those options, but I think we should probably at least hash out how we want to approach it.
The school budget runs so independent of the regular budget. And it's gotten a lot more transparent, but it's still one of these, where would you come up with the numbers? And then Jim Mealy's done a fantastically great job of summarizing change year over year. But it's one of those, what's in it, kind of thing. And that's huge. So I would suggest someone actually do pay attention to that.
I think it's,
People don't look at me. That involves going to the meetings.
It does.
It really does. So,
It's like 4 meetings, 5 meetings that you have to really participate in. I'll join you.
okay, we can do that.
you guys want to you want
That's fine.
I'll take
to
on
take
this.
that challenge?
Yeah,
Sure.
Okay.
I might learn something.
It's a new challenge for you, I feel like.
It is.
That's a joke.
So it's just one more time for me. So what are we trying to achieve with if going into, on a quarterly or monthly or quarterly base, looking at the actuals?
So in my opinion, traditionally, we focused on the budget process. And so I think by maintaining a pulse on kind of what is happening on an actual basis, we can be less reactive and more proactive in terms of understanding what issues may be coming down the pipeline and having, the ability to be a better partner to the Board of Selectmen and to the school committee or whoever may need the finance committee to assist in any way possible. If we're not paying attention to those things and we're only paying attention to the budget process, I think we're missing a key component of what our role should be.
I was just wondering what we missed in the past by not looking at that.
So I think, I mean, the big piece I think is this: if we had, I think, been following a little bit more of the Stevens estate, we could have had a more proactive approach to the issues that we kind of faced right before special town meeting. And I think that is a prime example of why, if we take a more active approach, we can hopefully hedge some of those issues.
There was also too last year, it wasn't so much a surprise because there was communication, but I just felt like it was like, not enough early on. It was the school budget and the fact that they were going to be way off the numbers because of both in capital as well as the operating, because of the early childhood center wasn't staffed and capital budget wise wasn't done right, and we had to understand what the heck happened. So we had a deeper dive of that kind of thing, but that was after the fact kind of thing. And it's like, okay, is there some way we might have seen that earlier? I'm guessing. I really don't know, Thomas, but that's the kind of stuff that happened last year, I know.
Here's another one like CPC. We didn't get that report until like 15 minutes before town meeting. I mean, I'm exaggerating slightly. But we really didn't know anything that was gonna be put before town meeting. That's one of the biggest financial pieces. I mean, that's huge chunks of money. And our report was like really last minute. There was almost no way for us to even comment or think about it. I think that someone needs to be plugged into CPC. What's bubbling up? What are they voting for they have to decide what projects they want to accept. The Finance Committee should know that way ahead of time. Not that we're telling them what they can and cannot do, but, bring it back here. Hey, they're considering this. Maybe we could become more knowledgeable before we actually have to decide or vote, up or down. That, to me, I thought was kind of glaring last year.
I mean, and there's other present issues, right? So this is not on our agenda, but there is kind of a change in potentially the senior center project. And so that's something that if we weren't plugged into what was happening and people weren't from this committee going to Board of Selectmen meetings or watching them or having conversations with other, board or committee members, we wouldn't understand that, and that has a financial impact.
Yeah.
So those are just things that, if we're kind of tied into the bigger picture, we can make better financial recommendations and still stay focused on what our role is. We are not here to create policy, but we can certainly understand the financials behind how how, what a future policy or change would be
suspect
impactful.
strongly that this Paid Family Medical Leave Act is gonna have an impact on the town. It goes into effect October the 1st. I don't know if there's been any
Where is that?
discussion about that. What's
We
that?
have our own paid family leave, medical leave act, and it's, I mean, we have a handle on it. I don't think it changes ours too much. I think it's more driven towards the private sector.
Actually,
I
the
don't-
Commonwealth of Massachusetts is subject to it. They just
Okay.
sent out a memorandum to all their employees. We're employee-driven here in North Andover, like most municipalities, and I think it's like 0.75% of
Yeah.
person's salary that covers them. I didn't know if you've received anything on that yet, but
I haven't, I'd have to check. with
that's
the
October the
HR
1st is
department.
right around the corner. They're gonna start, it's not gonna take effect until January of 2021 or something like that, but they're already beginning to fund it. That the law was passed and effective January 1st of this year, but that's something that's certainly coming down the pike. And I know the Commonwealth is already sending out advisories through their collective bargaining groups and so forth because of the memorandums that, Tim's laughing, because of the memorandums that are gonna have to take place to allow the employee contribution of the act, to fulfill the act. So I don't know if that's something that's on our agenda this year, but it's something I wanted to raise with the group right away.
Yeah, no, I think that's
I'm
helpful.
open to that.
Yeah, if that's gonna be impactful, and, we should definitely look at that. And so I guess it's just kind of a function of changing the way we're thinking to a more active approach than a passive approach, and more focused on what our actuals are and how that would impact a budget, and not our budget and then, oh, here are the actuals. So, which I don't think that we have intentionally done the latter ever, but I think it's just good to continue in the same direction we've been continuing in over the last couple of years.
The other aspect, just popped in my head, it's our new town manager, and getting the comfort and feel, and likewise back and forth, and she's just not doing it with the finance committee, she's doing it with everybody. So that'll be an interesting exercise and challenge for you, Sasha.
Yeah, I mean, I am excited. I think that's great, right? And we have a new, refreshing style, and we can kind of see how that works. I think it'll be a good thing. So all that being said, do you guys have some feedback? We kind of talked a little bit, on how specifically you want to approach this. I think it maybe at this point is just bigger picture items, and then once we get closer to the warrant letter, potentially, we drill down into sections to write it, but we kind of start thinking about bigger picture, or how do you?
The fields, I just want to put that on the list. 'Cause
Yeah.
The middle school fields is another large item, which isn't going as smoothly as has hoped.
Yeah.
So
I guess if we're going from like a topic perspective, right? So we established, I think, 5 or so topics at our last meeting that we just wanted to ask questions about. So one was, or some of them were more, elevated, important than others, but was definitely the schools. So specifically the middle school, and is that coming down the pipeline or not? Are we, we have to kind of hear from the school committee and department on that. OPEB. So in terms of the OPEB committee, Chuck and Tim are still on the committee. Tim, do you want to maintain your position on that committee this year?
Yeah, I have no problem with it.
Okay, unless there's any objection, but I think that makes sense. The Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, so this is something that we kind of talked about last year, and, I think we should continue to talk about and look at and see if there'll be any impacts to us in terms of water sewer rates with kind of the publication of kind of more transparency of the sewage that's being released into the Merrimack. What approach are they taking to manage that, and will that be a cost specifically to North Andover? I think that's one of them that we talked about. Obviously, the Stevens Estate, and so we actually need to appoint or have a discussion about appointing a member of the Finance Committee or someone not on the Finance Committee, which is, I didn't realize, also a possibility. we can appoint someone that maybe was potentially a former finance committee member, or that has has been on the finance committee, has a strong knowledge of municipal finance to be our representative on that committee as well.
The long-term planning committee.
Right, so to be clear, the Board of Selectmen has decided that they're gonna have two separate committees for the Stevens Estate. One will be the existing kind of board, right, that's in place today that continues to focus on operations, and, they'll work out, I think, some kinks in what their bylaws are and how they operate. And then the second piece is a new committee, and that's the long-term planning committee. And, after speaking with some of the selectmen, my impression is that it can be a varied commitment. So they haven't asked specifically for a deadline on a recommendation, and they really want the committee to get together and then decide, are we gonna, really try to push over the next 3 months to get a recommendation and, meet a bunch of times and be done? Or is this a much longer process and we're gonna meet less frequently, do a lot of independent research, and this is gonna be, past the next town meeting into 2021, right?
I watched that meeting, and I
Yeah.
think they really want the committee to have a beginning and an end date.
Yep.
What those dates are, but like, this isn't like a forever new committee.
No.
This is a specific, a mission-driven.
Yep.
Do this task. They're gonna have to decide on the
Yep.
task, how long they wanna do it, but do this task and then present. And so it's not like an ongoing committee forever and ever. The original committee, yes, you still need the oversight of operations, although I think they were looking for a little shift in how that functioned. Obviously,
Yeah.
Lynn, you spoke to that very eloquently, that, yes, I know Regina did also, that this is just different the way it functions.
So on the long-term committee, there was, the analogy is the OPEB. Chris Nobley was appointed as the chair to lead that group. Is there something like that relative to this?
I would say it may similar, but not exactly the same. I think there's a more concrete deliverable, right?
No, I wanna know who's leading it. I'm just curious who's.
Oh, no, so,
That has not been decided.
so Rosemary and Regina were appointed to the subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen that created the parameters for how to move forward, which is create those two committees. And then from that point, I think they have 4 people that are being appointed by the Board of Selectmen. And then they have one from the Finance Committee, one from the Conservation Committee, one from the Health, what's the third? I think it's Health. And so from there, that will be the committee. And I don't know if there'll be a Board of Selectmen member that's specifically on that committee, but I don't think so. So I don't think it's like, if that's what you're asking, like Chris was on the OPEB committee. I don't think that's the approach, but I could be wrong. I guess for me, the kind of after speaking to a couple people, the feedback I got is that, it's someone who has the ability to spend the time to work hard on the committee. It's definitely a huge task. But another piece is someone who kind of is unbiased, so has the ability to, and everyone has their own inherent biases, I don't mean it like that, but I think someone who is comfortable in saying, I don't have a strong opinion either way, I'm open to exploring avenues, different avenues and different approaches to this problem that we have, to get to the best solution for basically everyone in the community. So I think those were the two big things, and I'm open to anyone who wants to be on the committee, and we don't have to make a decision today.
Just another understanding, so so how does that fit? So there's a trustee. My understanding was always, I'm trying to get my heads around, who is now responsible to deliver what? So is the committee now put together by 6, 7 people, they need to come up with a plan?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that overrides the trustee and anybody else who is
So-
kind of,
Think
making
we'll
all the
stop.
big noise
think
before
we'll-
the special town meeting?
I think
How
our-
would that, how does that fit?
I
mean,
think
are they
ours-
accepting it, or at the end they are fighting it again? And
So maybe,
No.
Enforce it.
so maybe we got more clarification needed, but my understanding at the end of the item last year was that the current trustees are really no more than an advisory board, and they have very little
Short time.
no, they're short-term, but more importantly, they're advisory. They're not necessarily, they don't have much rule over the whole thing. The Board of Selectmen are the people responsible for the Stevens estate. And that's the clearest thing that came to my mind when we were going through this research, is that at the end of the day, it's the Board of Selectmen who is responsible for the Stevens estate. They're the trustees, in my opinion.
So they have so if the Board of Selectmen are responsible, they've decided to take this approach to handle the Stevens estate situation. One is a group of people that are responsible for being an advisory committee regarding operations and those specific operational tasks in the short run, and maybe longer than that, depending on how long they're on that committee, and then a separate and distinct long-term planning committee that is going to basically make a recommendation on, you know, what the long-term approach is for the asset. And part of that includes looking at other venues. Part of that includes doing, you know, community outreach and getting involvement and opinions from, you know, people within the town and other stakeholders. I mean, it's a bigger, I think, piece. And what it does is it allows us, I think, as a committee and some of the other committees and the Board of Selectmen to appoint those people.
So is there, with this committee, this long-term committee, is there, you talked about it in terms of having a clear deliverable and making some sort of recommendation. Is that, and I guess maybe I should go back to the Board of Selectmen meeting, but is there a clear set of parameters for that?
No.
Or is it just a blank slate?
It's a blank
just
slate.
go
Kind of a
figure this
blank
out?
slate. I mean, from what I understand, they really want a group to get together and think, okay, we had all these problems, how the estate was functioning, you know, like, what is its purpose? What is it supposed to be? You know, the town obviously loves the estate, wants to preserve it, you know, the town did vote for this, but what does that mean? What does preserving the estate mean? Does it mean that the town must own it? Does it, you know, because it might not mean that, you know, is that the best thing to have happen? And, you know, if it is or isn't, what are the recommendations for what you would do? So it's like a long-term thought. You look at other towns, you know, how do they handle these sorts of issues? How do their establishments function? So a committee would have to decide, you would really be a blank slate, say like, what are our parameters? You'd have to put together an outline. Your first, you know, you'd have to go through all the steps. What do we have to think about here? How do we think about this? How do we do the outreach? All of those things. So you're not in the day-to-day. You're not, you know, handling a wedding or deciding who's going to be in or who's not going to be in. Any of those things. It's a much broader. What are we doing with this estate? How does it function within the town? Can the town support this? You know, and the answers might be yes, the answers might be no. And if, like, where would the finances come from to support this? Where would the revenues come from? And if you took revenues from someplace, you know, what would be lacking? You know, why would you want to do this? It's a very, very broad,
Planning exercise, basically.
yes, of like, you know, what happens with this piece of property?
So the term is long-term, but it's really a strategic planning.
A
committee.
strategic planning.
You know, they're gonna have it like, what, few months, you know,
Yeah.
and beginning and end and get out of it.
And so that they can report to the Board of Selectmen and say, this is what we have discovered in our research, and this is what we, you know, so that they can report back, because the Board of Selectmen obviously can't, that's why you have a subcommittee, right? Because they're in charge, but they can't do it within their weekly meetings. Who's on what,
No,
this,
They haven't appointed it yet?
no,
No. So
there's,
there's an application process.
Yes.
People apply, so they 4 people will be chosen by the Board of Selectmen, and then each
Yeah.
three
this
boards
was the
will appoint.
discussion at the last Board of Selectmen
Well,
meeting.
two are already appointed.
You know, how do we develop
No.
this
Oh,
committee?
I thought Regina and.
Rosemary and Regina are the ones doing the development of it
Oh,
and
okay.
are
Yeah.
going to select people. I don't know that
Oh,
they're
okay.
actually going to serve on it. They might oversee, we might report, you know, that
A
committee might.
deliverable, but I don't think they, and I could be wrong, but I don't think
I'm not
so.
sure. That was unclear to me too, so that's a
Yeah.
fair question. Are they actually gonna be sitting on that committee? Because I could see Rosemary would love to do that, and I think Regina too. So they might be sitting on that committee, but I'm not
No.
sure. No?
And when I talked to her, I didn't get that sense, but I didn't ask the specific
You would
question.
know, you would know better, Lynn.
Put a committee together that is of objective people that are not on the Board of Selectmen. So that when the report is delivered to the Board of Selectmen, it hasn't been produced by them.
Right.
Because this has to be presented to the residents to how we're gonna proceed and
Yeah,
move forward.
that makes sense. That makes sense. So,
My bias is.
everybody's got some biases, but, you know,
I don't. I am not vice president, and I was
Not
not a
yet.
part of, but, well, I was, I mean, I
Not yet.
you've been pointing at me for the last 10 minutes. But honestly, like, I wasn't involved in the process last time. I was on the planning board and then was off of it and was not in any way part of the town meeting other than being a citizen that was there and listening to all of the speakers. So I have no biases going into it. So I would be willing to consider serving on that.
Okay.
I'm concerned about the time commitment. And I guess if this is gonna be a really intense thing over the next 3 months, that might be more difficult for me to take on rather than something that gets spread out over the longer term. But if there's more details and nobody else wants this, I'd be happy to.
Maybe a conversation with Regina would help you in that. Because you have a nice analytical point of view, and I think that's a lot of it, really, is like, what are all the pieces?
Right.
How does this fit into place? So you don't have, I think the whole goal is to go into a town meeting, because it's gonna happen again, and not have, well, this person says this thing, and this person says this thing, and what is the truth? That's crazy. That was just, that wasn't just points of view, that was two sets of spreadsheets, two sets of facts, if you wanna call them that, and that just can't happen again.
Yeah.
So I think we'll leave it at, does everyone, if Jen, once you learn more, make a
If other
determination.
people are interested in this, I mean, I don't wanna jump on anybody.
Is anyone else?
Well, we're interested, but we're too biased.
Well, so
Thomas would love to be on the committee, okay? And we can bring in Liz as well.
So I think that Jen, you'd be an amazing, member of that committee. How about we'll leave it at this, if everyone else in the committee is comfortable with it, we'll tentatively say, Jen will be our representative, and unless, after a conversation with Regina, potentially you feel uncomfortable, we can come back, and reevaluate. Is that fair?
Yeah, I could probably do it too. I mean, I can't do, like, if I'm gonna do all the school committee stuff, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
that's,
We-
it's a lot of commitment.
I think we'd
I'll
have
be
to.
there in the school committee.
I know.
I think we would have to separate that if
Yeah.
that was, so let's leave it, as is for now, and if there's any change, I can communicate that back to everyone, and we can keep in touch, and
Yeah.
is that fair? Okay, so, so we kind of have, and if you want, Jen too, I can be your kind of second person in terms of the finance committee's responsibilities for that. So if we, to kind of jump on that with you in terms of analyzing kind of how those actuals are. So we're a group of 2 and 2 on kind of the bigger budget items, if that helps everyone. All right.
Because there are two sets of actuals.
There's the actual, there's another actual.
And then there's a pseudo actuals.
I missed that joke for a second. It went over. I was like, is he?
Whatever do you want it to be.
Took me a minute. All right. So, and then, let's start thinking about, I don't know if anyone else is interested in taking on the other kind of enterprise funds. I know historically, Ed, you have done that, but we also have, Kevin, if you want to think about what things you're most interested in, we can also go from there too. And then maybe something separate that we've never really focused on. So we can table this, I think, for now, if everyone's comfortable, give it some more thought, and we'll come back with kind of the list, and I'll have this up and running, and we can type it in, and we'll actually do the budget calendar at the same cross my fingers. We'll do the budget calendar at the same time. So typically what we do every year is Lynn will create the budget calendar for the year, and what we'll do is we'll make sure our meetings fall within the deliverables required within that calendar. And what we'll also do is we'll kind of cross-reference the Board of Selectmen and school committee meetings, and we'll kind of have people from the finance committee attend those meetings if possible, just so we are kind of up to speed. So the other thing I just wanted to kind of mention and report back is Ed and I did ask about the use of NDAs to town council, and we had some back and forth, and instead of editorializing the conversation, I just put the email chain within your packet, so you can kind of see that and have that for yourselves. Basically, at this point, I have a meeting with the new town manager to welcome her, which I'm really excited to meet her, and also just to kind of ask her about this issue based on kind of the feedback I received from the committee that we wanted to get that data. So I will just report back, and Ed can report back, at the next meeting, kind of how that goes and kind of what we think moving forward.
And I don't think you're asking for attorney-client privilege information, by the way. I think you're just asking for numbers, so I think that's way off base, the comments I read in those emails.
I agree with that.
Okay.
The underlying facts of numbers and the existence of something is not privileged information, so I think you should be able to get, there's non-privileged information out there that you should be able to get.
Okay. And I think as a committee, it's really, again, part of that, trying to get ahead of it.
The next question might lead to something where they say, we can't talk about that.
Right.
But I don't think, based on the questions that you and Ed asked in those emails, no way.
Okay. That's helpful feedback
No
from
way.
attorneys.
Yeah.
So thanks.
100%.
You know,
Even council members.
Me too.
It's so like
It's not even
We're gonna
close.
speak up, so, I mean.
Good, thank you. I
No
appreciate
way.
the feedback. So so I'll just kind of keep you guys in the loop, and you have that information just to be transparent, so you know the questions we're asking and how we're asking them, and we'll just move forward from there. What else does anyone kind of want to bring up anything or have a conversation about any other issue? I think I can anticipate what our public comment may be about. But one thing that I think Stan mentioned last meeting and we should start thinking about is, if we have additional revenue from a big player like Amazon in the future, how do we handle that as a community? And, do we as a finance committee have any recommendations? Is there some kind of long-term approach, do we have? So let's start thinking about that and work that in potentially to this year and in our kind of approach and thought process.
Madam Chair, one thing I heard before the meeting started
Yeah.
was discussion about who would be the two finance committee appointees to the revenue and fixed cost.
Yep, that's on our, that's next. So the Revenue and Fixed Cost Committee meets every year. Lynn would need those appointments, you said, by,
Probably at the latest, second week of October.
okay, so why don't we take care of it now? Typically, we see if new members want to be on that committee, and whoever else. I actually am happy to be one of those committee members if no one else wants to do that, and then.
Just my experience, I've done it a few times, and I think, first of all, you learn so much more about the revenue and the fixed cost part of the town budget and how numbers come up. It involves the school department, there's a school committee member? Or I know it's definitely superintendent and Jim Mealy are there. There's a board of selectmen, there's two finance committee people. Lynn leads it. The meetings don't go long. Lynn sends out spreadsheets ahead of time, so that you have a chance to analyze it and find out where there's footing errors and other Excel-type mistakes. There are none anymore.
We leave that up to you.
Yeah.
I do
But-
that intentionally.
But to see if I can find that Easter egg kind of thing. But it's really is a great opportunity to jump in and just, wow, I didn't know. And you can see the conservatism as well as built into the thought process of the budget. And the interesting thing that I think this year would be how the town manager applies that conservatism. Will it be consistent, or will they say, well, geez, motor vehicle excise went up $600,000 beyond what you had planned. Let's put that as the next year's budget. And you have to say, whoa, it's really your recommendation that gets into the budget.
And that's like 2 or 3 meetings, did you say?
Yeah, it's usually 2 or 3. It all depends on what issues come up within the recommendations that I set forth to the committee.
Is there
I was
a
gonna
particular evening that they meet?
Yeah, we actually meet during the day.
Oh.
But it's first thing in the morning.
I was gonna say, we picked on Jen already. Should we pick on you?
Is there a particular day of the week that usually?
I usually try and coordinate it with availability of everybody, but it's usually during, if it's not in the morning, it could be late afternoon.
I'll do it with you, Sasha.
Is that comfortable for everyone, or is there anyone else that wanted to? Does that work?
Yeah.
All right. Great.
Look at you getting stuff done.
Okay.
So
Public-
you'll get an email from me as to when the first meeting will be.
Perfect.
And then from the first meeting, we have 45 days to produce the recommendation to the town manager.
Great.
Just a-
Public comment?
Cue the public.
Cue the public.
Cue the public. Thanks.
John Q.
John Q. Generic public. Stan Lippert, 43 Stonecliff Road. You said you had 5 areas that or 5 items you were gonna, and you did 4 and you didn't do 5. What was the 5th one? I'm just curious. Was there 5?
Schools, OPEB,
School?
Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, Stevens Estate, and we had been asking questions about the use of non-disclosure.
Oh, NDAs with the 5th?
Yep.
Okay. I didn't know that was on the list. I might suggest that you all might want to give some thought to adding to that list maybe the CPA, because it is a couple of $1 million a year. And, you know, it's how is the process working in terms of transparency, and, you know, how is the money allocated by, you know, it's like the capital plan. It's like the CIP, it's a similar kind of a situation. So it's just something you might want to think about.
Yeah, and I
You know.
think that list wasn't exhaustive. It was the 5 things we talked about at the last meeting.
Right,
So
right, right.
I think we've probably added, you know, having an eye on the senior center because
Yeah.
of kind of changes. I think definitely looking at CPA
Yeah, yeah.
and Amazon.
Well, and, you know, one of the reasons why it's become more of a big deal is because of this lawsuit, right? I mean, you know, because that's the crux of that suit. So that's put CPA in kind of a spotlight. The other thing that I was thinking about is when you look at, you know, Lynn's actuals, you know, we have a lot of construction already going on in town. And I'm assuming we're getting a lot of additional receipts for things, you know, building permits and all that sort of stuff. Is that money showing up in the actuals already? So are we seeing that?
No.
Not yet?
It depends, it's all timing.
It's all timing.
So not yet?
And-
Not yet.
Right, and, do you want me to?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, no, use this. Okay.
So the one thing you have to consider with these construction projects that are going on,
Yeah,
that this is gonna be a one-time infusion.
yeah,
of
yeah,
money.
yeah, yeah.
So you
Yeah, yeah,
can't,
yeah.
you gotta look at that and say, okay, so we might get, you know, I'm gonna just throw a number out there, this isn't what we're gonna get, you know, $500,000 for building permits from the Amazon project.
Yep.
We don't wanna look at building a budget in that one year
Yeah.
on that $500,000, because we wouldn't be able to
Absolutely.
sustain it next year.
Absolutely.
So it's a
Understand.
one-year infusion of money.
Sure.
So look at that and say, okay, well, do we wanna let that go to free cash and then use that one-time infusion for a project to fund something, which is a one-time use, rather than building a
Right.
budget, having people hire staff and then
Sure.
not be able to
No,
sustain
no,
it the
I
following year.
understand that. You know, so like,
We just wanna
you would use
protect
the money
that.
like for the middle school or something like
Yes,
that, you know, one-time
exactly.
deal, and
Right,
you're good.
when
Yeah,
that-
no,
when that eventually gets
I-
to the point where you potentially get the SBA,
Right,
or we
right.
decide that's not viable, look at other avenues for that.
I understand, but, you know, for you all, from the sort of the thought process, there's a lot of that going on now. So there's that money kind of floating around, and where should that money, you know, what are the suggestions or recommendations about what might be done with that money? You know, and to Lynn's point, one-time use, I mean, it's not, you don't build it into the operating budget, but you can use it for capital things, and, you know, it gives us a wonderful opportunity to do some stuff we might not have been able to do. So anyway, it's just, that would be some of the things that I would be interested in, but anyway, sounds like fun.
Thank you.
Thank you, Stan.
Sorry, jumping on the public comment.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's, no, we
Anything else before we adjourn?
want it to be clear.
All right. Do I have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
I motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Do I have a second?
You know,
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
The meeting is adjourned.
Meant to put a motion out there for getting Jennifer removed.